Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today is a very special episode because Demetrius and I had the opportunity to spend some time reviewing the Apple Vision Pro. We went out, we went to the store, we met with the associates, we went through some demos, we asked a ton of questions, and now we have a UX review of it. So we're just going to jump right in and get started. Good morning, Dee. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I had a lot of fun with checking out the Apple Vision Pros, and we had a lot of thoughts. We had a lot of thoughts based on this.
Yeah, I think I went into the situation, to be honest, with some preconceived notions about what I was going to think about it, even though I was trying not to. But then you walk in the door and you start to like imagine things. You start to wonder, is it going to be heavy? Is it going to be light? What is the glass going to feel like? And all of that. And I thought it was really great that the Apple associates that we worked with, very kind people, you had a different person than I did,
hmm
answered all our questions, talked about our business needs, talked about everything. And it kind of gave us a nice, clear, like picture of how we see this device. But before we actually get into all the details and everything, let's talk about what happened with this day and how it all got set up and what
Sure.
happened as we like went into this experience. So for everyone who's listening, Demetrius reached out to me last week, maybe it was the week before, and said, "Hey, I've been really wanting to do a review of the Apple Vision Pro. Watched tons of videos on it, looked at all
hmm
the specs, everything. Let's set some time up." And so we had set up some time earlier in the week. Now, D mostly uses Android devices. We kind of have a split. So I have a lot of Apple stuff. He has a lot of Android stuff. Kind of helped us with our business to kind of have a nice variety of options to play around with when it comes to testing products for clients and things like that. So he asked me to sign up because I actually have an Apple ID and he does not. So I signed up for a slot for us to go in and test it. And I had to put in my Apple ID and my information,
hmm
which means that I had this inkling that when we showed up, they were not going to let us split our time and do like half the time with him and half the time with me. But we didn't know. And Apple is usually pretty cool about like figuring things out. So we showed up in the Palo Alto store, downtown Palo Alto. It was a beautiful day, not a lot of people in the store. When we first got there, the person checking me in said, "Okay, you're doing your Apple Vision Pro analysis today or review of it. Um, do you wear glasses, this and that?" And ask all the basic questions of me. And I said, "Hey, my business partner's with me. We couldn't sign up both of us at the same time. Can we split our time and actually test it?" They said no because of how custom the device is. Now, we were not fully aware on like what that actually meant, and we'll explain in a minute. But they couldn't do that. So what they did is they actually found a way to squeeze Demetrius in to have a full review by him individually after me, and he can kind of explain his own experience about that. But they were kind enough to kind of figure that whole thing out. So we went in, we sat down, and we started our process. So D, you were observing me as I was getting started, getting set up, um, and kind of calibrating in order to get the right Apple Vision Pro version for my face. What were some
hmm
of your thoughts sitting there, kind of observing this setup process?
well, it definitely seemed pretty finicky. Like it was somewhat custom to you, but it was less custom and more just kind of fitted. So it's not like they built a custom face. They took a scan of your face, but I guess that was just kind of to get, and they did this for me also, just to get a sense of sizing, and then they have
Mm-hmm.
pre-constructed like eye shields in order to fit you within a certain range. And it's not perfect, but it's kind of close enough. They want to get a good light seal in order to prevent light from coming in because it affects apparently how well it can track your eyes.
Yeah.
Um, and they were very particular about how you picked it up because things could like could fall off and things like that. So it's like, okay, this is something you're going to have to baby when you get a hold of it.
Yeah, I don't think you have to baby the entire device. I think what they were trying to get at was like if you put your thumb on the front of it and you lift
hmm
it up and hold it, the part that's in the middle that is more custom or fitted, as you said, is actually connected via magnet. So because of
hmm
that, if you grab it from that piece and you lift it up, the magnet might come off, and then the device, the Vision Pro, would fall and hit the table.
Yeah.
So that was actually a little bit of a shock to me because Apple usually is pretty good about like, oh, this is all Gorilla Glass. You could drop it in water and all that kind of stuff. So they were just being a little more particular about how I handled it,
Yeah.
which is fine. Which is fine. The interesting thing about the custom piece that they fitted on me in order to keep the light out is that the sales rep and the person I was talking to said that there's a whole variety of them. Matter of fact, there's somewhere between 20 and 24 of them.
Hmm.
And when you do the scan of your face, they determine which one they think is going to fit best in order to keep that light out. So it's not like I could take this device and say, oh, Dee's face is kind of like mine, so he could just use it and play
Yeah.
with it. He needs that inner piece that keeps the light out, custom for his face. Otherwise, he's not going to have probably the optimal experience. That's my guess.
Yeah, so one thing you can't really do with this is, well, number one, you can't really take it off and put it on quickly, right? Because and it was weird to me that they did this in this way, that it was like so custom fit, like you have to use the custom insert, but the insert like just came off really easily. And
Mhm.
when it's not really intended to be swappable regularly and quickly, I didn't know why it needed to be just held on with magnets. It would make more sense to have a latch so that it would be a bit more secure in there. Um,
Yeah, maybe they did that though because if you're in a family of, say, one, two, three, or four people, and you all have a different fitted component, then it would be easy for you to pull it off, snap the other one on, and then put the headset on.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, it feels like the kind of thing where they could just do a bit more of a universal one. Uh,
Yeah,
the only reason they need that, from what I understand, from what I was have been told, is they need enough of a light seal in order for the internal cameras to track your eyes. So that's it doesn't really seem like it's an intended use case to be taking it off and swapping it out and handing it to other people. It seems like it's like this is your device, it is yours. It's not really intended for like a communal kind of thing or to be passed around.
yeah.
So I mean, even if you are doing that, I mean, you would need to have the insert available and ready. So it doesn't seem like it would make that much sense to like unlatch, swap it out, latch it on something else because it's not like somebody's going to be putting it on for 30 seconds and then like handing it off to the next person.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I would assume that if you're going to put this thing on, that you would have a decent
Yeah.
experience, like maybe a couple minutes at the very least, right? Is like you're going to try out a video or something like that. What were some of your thoughts prior to coming in the store and seeing this initial experience as I was getting fitted and getting ready to put this on? Like, did you already have preconceived notions of like how this device would function or fit or look or anything before you walked in the door?
I had some expectations. So I've seen some reviews. I've talked to people who own it. Like I have some. I know some people who are Apple employees who have it, and they've told me like, oh, it's very impressive, and it's a really beautiful piece of hardware. It's really well built, and all those things were true. Um, I also mentioned that the method of interacting with it used the gestural interface primarily and eye tracking,
Uh huh.
which I have never really liked gestural interfaces, and I've worked on them dating back like I don't know, like 12, 13 years ago.
Hmm.
And everyone I try is better, but it's still just like I would just prefer like a different form of interface.
So, just for
Like
those who may not understand, when you say a gestural interface, you're talking about using your hands to kind of like virtually select buttons and things rather than actually having a remote control in your hand.
so it's recognizing gestures like hand movements,
Yeah.
or
Uh-huh.
sometimes it could be, other kinds of movements. It could be you could be moving your feet. Like if you have one of those vehicles that have the lift gate in the back that you use your foot to operate so that it lifts up so you don't have to use
Oh
your
yeah,
hand.
yeah. Uh huh.
That's technically a gestural interface. It's a very kind of crude form of it, but it exists, and that's honestly, I feel like that's kind of the extent of it working really, really optimally.
Yeah.
Beyond something like replacing an individual button press, like it just gets way too complex and gets a little odd. So I noticed, for example, when you were going through, and so like I said before, it's a bit finicky. Like it took 10 minutes roughly to go from like, here's the device to, or not even here's the device, because they have to scan your face first. So you have to do a
Yeah.
face scan. Then they bring out the device with the right insert. Then you put it on. And you have to get it fitted right, because if it's, I noticed that when it wasn't tight enough, everything kind of looked blurry. Um, and what I'd have to do is like I had to tighten the thing up, and it was kind of squeezing my head a little bit at that point. But then the clarity of the video was much better. Um,
Yeah.
and I noticed when you were going through, because you started your setup first, because then you have to calibrate it for tracking your eyes and tracking your hands. And I
Yep.
noticed for a lot of your inputs with your hands, you had to repeat them multiple times.
I did, yeah. And so I didn't it was weird. It didn't take a long time for me to figure it out and get it working basically 100%. But initially it was awkward just for a moment to squeeze my fingers together in order to select something.
Hmm.
So like in my mind, I think I just want to like poke it, or
Yeah,
push it, right? Because you're trained that way. But then you go on this device and they're like squeeze here or squeeze your fingers and pull them apart, and that will allow you to zoom and stuff like that. So you're kind of like half learning. It's not hard. You're
hmm,
just learning a new way of interacting with something.
yeah,
But I definitely had to try it a few times, kind of warm up to it. I also haven't honestly done a lot of gestural interface stuff in a while. Like there's
yeah. It's
not a
been a
lot of
while.
devices out that use gestural interfaces. They got really big, like you said, like 12 years ago. Everyone and their grandmother was
Yeah,
trying to add it into something, and then it just kind of disappeared a little bit. So this was kind of like my first time really kind of navigating with it in a long time. I do want to say something about the fitting of it. Um, you said that you had to tighten it and all that kind of stuff. I think anything that goes over the head is going to be challenging like that because when I
hmm,
first put it on, I had the same thing where like, okay, it's on, I can see, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to tighten this really tight. That was my first thought. So she hands me let's just roll it back a second. So they finally bring it up and they give it to me. And she says, okay, now it's time to put it on your head. And she showed me where it's only like three buttons on it. There's the twist in the back and then one on the left, one on the right, the crown basically, and then like a select button. And so I put it on the back of my head, and my first initial thing that I did, like if you were doing a usability test, right, was I immediately started cranking it. And for some reason, my mental model was I should crank this as tight as I possibly can so it doesn't fall off.
mm,
But when I did that, it started to actually hurt
yeah,
because I made it too tight. So then I loosened it. So then, like the first like minute or two after loosening it, I thought to myself like, "Oh, I hope this doesn't slide up and down." So I started taking my
mm,
fingers and kind of pushing it up a little to see if I would have a different visual experience with it being tighter versus being looser on my face. It actually worked a little bit better being looser, which has its downsides because the looseness of it actually creates a feeling of the device pulling down, and it kind of fatigued on the front of my face, kind of like around where my eyes are a little bit. So I'm trying to figure out in my mind at that moment, like what is the right fitting for this experience. Like
yeah.
I
I
said, it
did things a
wasn't
little bit.
difficult, but
Yeah,
it was.
I did something a little bit differently. Instead of trying to crank it as tight as it
Wait,
could,
did you wear your glasses though? Did you wear your
no, I was
glasses?
wearing contacts.
Okay, okay,
Um,
okay.
and had like a back and forth with the person that was helping us about what would this be like if I was wearing contacts, because apparently there's a prescription setting.
Uh huh.
You can enter your prescription in, and he kind of answered, but I didn't fully understand the answer because what I was asking was, is there like a toggle where I can turn the prescription on and off rather
Mm,
than like having to take my contacts out if I'm have contacts in while I'm wearing that, because it's set up for me when I'm wearing uh, when I don't have contacts in.
yeah, got
So
it.
also if you're swapping it if so one of the big things before I want to get back into the fitting a little bit, but one of the
Yeah.
things is that if you expect to have that use case that you might have with a meta quest where like you have it on in your and then you hand it to your friend and then they use it, it's not
Hmm.
really like that. You can't really just be like, hey, check this out, this is awesome. You
That
have
was
to
one of the
go
most
through an
shocking things,
entire
honestly.
process, like 10 minutes before they can really use it.
Yeah, I would. Well, okay. Let's wait. Let's frame that up a little bit. So,
Mm-hmm.
I actually was kind of shocked by that, to be honest. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
thought you just hand it to your friend and go back and forth. I didn't realize it
Yeah.
was going to be
Well,
so much, right?
that's the precedent, right? That's what you can do that with a meta quest.
Yeah. So then, and all the old ones that we used to work on. I mean, you used to work in
Mm-hmm.
the Vision Lab at NASA, right? So we had them
Yeah.
over there. We play with them all the time. So that was kind of for me that framework was already set up. But I will say that if your friends and everybody already has a scan done, then that whole setup wouldn't need to happen because your data is saved on there. So at the end, she told me, she said, don't worry, all your data is saved on here. So if you use another one of these, then it already knows
Okay.
exactly how to calibrate it.
I mean, is that using like your identity profile, like your Apple ID, in order to
Correct.
use that? So that means sharing your personal data if you're using somebody else's device.
Well, I mean, sharing, I guess, that basic data about how to use it. I mean, if that's a problem for people,
Mhm.
but like it's just calibration data, right?
It's
It's
just something
just
to keep in mind. Well, it's also your Apple ID. So if somebody has a way of capturing what your Apple ID is, then they might have that. So it's one of those things where like be careful who you're using your Apple ID around because they could be using a keystroke logger or something like that in order to get access to it.
maybe. I mean, I actually liked it. I actually thought it was a cool idea because that way,
Hmm.
if you are picking up a device that's over at United Terminal and you want to play with it before
Yeah,
your airplane takes off, then you just tap it, scan it, and then boom, you're instantly like calibrated and ready to go. Assuming you have that
yeah.
piece in the middle, right? That
Well,
light
here's the
piece.
thing. And I'll bring it up later. I just wouldn't want to do the calibration. I don't think it's necessary.
You mean
And
at
I'll
all?
bring up why. Yes. Well, let me talk a little bit more about the fitting before we get into kind of
Uh huh.
the kind of navigation and UI because I have ideas around it. So the for me, you cranked it on as hard as you did. Could I just put it to a point where I felt like it was comfortable and kind of wanted to evaluate how the performance was. And then I realized that uh, that it was hampering the performance and I need to crank it down tighter. So it was tighter than would have been optimal comfort for me, but it was still good enough. I would say for people who have like for women who have longer styled hair, they're probably not really going to want to use this other than like at home and when they're not planning to go out. They're going to probably want to style their hair, or men, for example, who have longer hair that's styled.
Uh huh.
It does pretty well if you are, for example, a man with shorter hair like ourselves, where it's not going to mess up your hair up top. And if you have like close cropped on the sides, then it's going to be completely fine. It'll be like you never wore anything, which
Yeah.
is probably an advancement from a lot of other headsets out there, to be honest. Because if I put on a MetaQuest and stuff, I'm just like, all right, well, I just have to understand my hair's going to be messed up after this.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I had the same
otherwise, I think it's fine.
experience when I did the MetaQuest as well. I was playing with it outdoors on grass and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and it definitely you get done and you have to like kind of recomb
Yeah.
your hair or whatever, especially if you're at a party or something.
So the feel of it, so the I will say that the build quality is phenomenal. Like it looks beautiful, it feels really good in the hands. I have the complaint about the insert coming off because at one point
Uh-huh.
I just grabbed it at the very end when I was like taking it off and looking at it, and I grabbed it apparently the quote unquote wrong way, and the insert just dropped off, and I almost dropped it onto
Yeah,
the
I saw
table,
that
but I'll
happen.
get out
Yeah.
thankfully. So that's when I was just like, can't they just secure this? Like, it doesn't need to be. It doesn't seem like it's going to be swapping all the time. So like, I'd rather have it secured a little bit better, and I think that would be a little bit more optimal. You had thoughts about the weight, so why don't you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
I anticipated it weighing a lot less.
Hmm.
It's not heavy. So this is the problem, right? Is that until you try this thing, it's really hard to take someone else's advice on it. So it is not heavy. When you pick it up, you're like, oh, this is great. But I think anything that sits over your face over a period of time, you're going to feel the weight. If I took my finger and I put it on the back of your head and I pushed a little bit, you'd be like, oh, that doesn't bother me. But 20 minutes later, you might be, wow, my neck kind of hurts because there's this constant
Yeah.
force on the back of my head, right? And so when I had the device on, I remember initially thinking, okay, this isn't too bad. But then after like about 5 minutes or so, being completely honest, right? Like I was like, ow, like this kind of, it's putting some pressure on my face, like in a way that like I wouldn't want to sit there for 2 hours, but I could definitely sit there for 30 minutes. And I
Hmm.
know that this is something that Apple and everyone else is working through. Like I understand this. You know, I'm not trying to be like this naysayer that's picking out the like tiniest thing, most common thing that everyone's going to say, which is weight. But the fact is it did come up for me. It did flare up a little thought in my head of like, I wish this thing was about half the weight.
So I have some thoughts about the weight. I actually haven't looked it up, but I believe you did that the weight was actually less than competing headsets. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they said it's technically less than competing headsets,
Yeah.
but to me it felt very much just like the Oculus one because
So
I
I
tried
didn't
that one more
yeah.
recently.
I didn't have an issue with the weight in the moment, but after you said something to me, I was like, yeah, it did feel a little like it was pulling me forward. I think that has less to do with the weight and more about how the weight is distributed.
Correct.
Like I
Correct.
think with the glass front of it, it has weight that's further out from the contact point in the face and it creates a sense of leverage pulling you forward. So like it
Yeah.
wasn't so again, it wasn't enough for me to really be distracted by it or feel it in the moment. And I was only headed on for maybe half hour, I mean,
Yeah.
roughly. Um, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe more like 20 minutes. But I could see, like in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, there's an opportunity for improvement there with not so much the weight itself, but the distribution of it relative to your face.
So I have a couple thoughts about this. So the insert that's in the inside is made out of a very nice fabric. It's very
Hmm.
soft kind of fabric.
Yeah, it felt
Um,
really good, actually.
it felt really good. It seemed like a breathable fabric. So if it's on your
Hmm.
face, right, and you're breathing and you're sweating and that kind of stuff. What I'll say about the angle though is that because I loosened it a little bit, and this might be my fault in regard to feeling, because I loosened it a little bit, it started to pull down, and because it started to pull down just a little bit on my face, I started to feel that fabric insert kind of dig into the bottom of my eyes.
Mm,
Um, but then when I tightened it, it stayed more firm, but then it felt a little bit too tight, like almost
yeah,
claustrophobic tight, where I'm like, this is too tight on my face. And so I actually remember using it thinking like, oh, you know, I know that they chose not to use rubber because it doesn't breathe very well, but boy, would it be nice if it was, because when you crank it real tight, then it kind of just seals around your
yeah.
face and is soft. So this is going to be a materials challenge. This is going to be a weight challenge. Like this is their first version, so like I get it. I totally get it. It's
Yeah.
hard. Just like the
I,
Oculus one. Like I don't look at the Oculus and go, "This is the end all." Like this is just the beginning, right?
mhm.
But weight
I
and
will.
materials is everything.
I think it's an opportunity for improvement, but I think overall the form factor and the ergonomics are probably better than I've felt on any other headset.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will because the other ones they're not exactly as light as I would like them to be, and I much prefer the breathable fabric than the non breathable rubber that a lot of other ones
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
It's just it helped a lot as far as like avoiding getting sweaty. At the same time, I wasn't playing like Beat Saber like I was with others. I don't even
true.
know how possible that is with that because it wasn't part of the demo, which is honestly a bit of a disappointment. And I think it's because they might not have the capability of really doing all of that,
Well, I don't think
like
any of these
the nature of the hand
companies
tracker.
have a single have a really dialed in use case. But what I will say is the Quest appears to be driven toward gaming, and this one appears to
Hmm.
be driven toward entertainment without gaming. Meaning, I'm sure there
Yeah,
are some games in there, I know, but like it feels
it.
like an entertainment device, and the other one feels like a gaming device.
Well, I would say one of them is designed to be more interactive,
Uh huh.
and other VR headsets are designed to be interactive, and this one was designed to be purely consumptive, and or I would say primarily consumptive because the inputs and we talked. I was going to say that like there are certain aspects of things that I would change, and one of them is like the gestural input was the best that I've ever used. It was better than Connect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which doesn't exist anymore. I think that's for a reason. But I wouldn't say it was dramatically better than Connect. And it's kind of like, oh, this is the best I've ever had. I still don't like it. Ultimately, like it
Yeah.
was the best gestural interface I've ever used, but I still didn't like it. I had issues with getting it to recognize
Well,
the.
let's frame this up. So we're actually going to start talking a little bit about navigation and UI because you and I get excited when we talk about all these things. I just want to
Mhm,
make sure anyone who's listening. So let's move in. We had fitting, we put it on, and then it really started with the gestural stuff and the
mhm,
navigation and the user experience of like being able to move around this device. So you thought it was the best you've ever experienced, but you didn't like it. And why is that?
yes. It just still wasn't good enough. It was still slow. It was still error prone. One of the things you have to do is when I'll say it's not intuitive, but it's pretty quickly learnable. So you'll learn it, and then it'll be fine. Um, you at first were holding your hand up in front of you
Hmm.
for the front camera to capture your pinches, which I saw that and I was like, I hope you don't have to do that all the time because your arms are going to get really tired holding
You
them up like
don't.
that.
Yeah, I didn't know. It was an assumption that I made.
Yeah.
And then I told her, I said, "Do I have to have my hand out here?" She's like, "No, not at all." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
So there's nothing in the experience that's going to let you know that you can have your hands down. So yeah, that's something to know because there was never a prompt that was shown to me and said like, oh, you can do the taps from down below. Um, Once I did, it worked fine. But if your hands are too close together, then it's not going to recognize them. Like if your hands are overlapping, you can't recognize
Uh-huh.
the taps. But even if your hands are close together, it has a difficult time recognizing the taps. Um, the other thing is using your eyes as a cursor works well, but I don't like it. It's reminds me of using voice, right? Where you think it's really easy because you're just moving your eyes, but it inserts a certain amount of cognitive load on you. Now you have to be conscious of where you're putting your eyes every time that you're interacting with the device. You can't just look around freely, and you normally it's that's not normal. You don't normally go around thinking to yourself, here's where I'm putting my eyes every moment that you're interacting with anything, right? It's more you free float and you move around, and your eye movement is much more saccades, and it's not something that's very intentional. With this, you have to be intentional the whole time. It's kind of like with voice. The hard part with voice is formulating your commands, right? Formulating your voice commands. That's why it's tends to be very routine. Play a song, what's the weather, those kinds of things. But if you're doing something novel with a voice thing, you have to stop and say, like, okay, how am I going to phrase this so that it can understand, and so on and so forth, which isn't that different than communicating with a human. With this, like when I was typing or when I was interacting with things, it was very easy to look away because I wanted to check on something or look at something within the interface. And now I'm like, oh, wait, no, I can't really do that. I need to look at what I'm interacting with. And I think that got kind of tiring even just in a short period of time. And I think if you have to do that for a longer period of time, it's going to be very, very annoying.
It's interesting because I kind of disagree with you on that. I normally I think I would agree with you on the gestural
Mm-hmm.
thing, but I actually kind of liked it. I thought it was unique and I thought it was kind
Okay.
of fun and it kind of made me feel like a superhero because it's like wherever I look, suddenly
Yeah.
that thing is blinking, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun." And so something being fun doesn't necessarily mean over time it's going to be like the most
Yeah.
usable, but at least in the moment, I actually thought it was kind of cool. I was actually my initial thought when it happened was I was like, "This is incredibly impressive how accurate this is." Like whatever I
Yeah.
look at, it tends to like highlight it or whatever it was. And then I realized there's a lot of cameras in there, so it
Yeah.
makes sense
It's
that they can track it.
that's the thing. It's really impressive. But let me ask you a question. If you were going to be using this and in an interactive way for an hour, and I gave you the option of just using your eyes and the click thing,
Uh-huh.
or using like a mouse and keyboard that's connected through Bluetooth, or even just opening up your phone and using that as a cursor control and tapping,
Uh-huh.
just using that as like a touchpad kind of deal.
Uh-huh.
Which do you think you would use if you had to use it for an hour straight?
I still think I would use this. Yeah, I
Interesting.
think there's a lazy side of me that doesn't want to have more devices.
I
So I think that
I
there's a part of me. I was
yeah,
thinking about this the other day. I marinated on this D for like a good day and a half because
yeah,
I was like, would I want? You said something about, oh, I'd love to be able to use my phone to navigate and all that stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, I kind of slightly over that. Like it works very well. It's like having a really nice website that has factual information all listed and organized, and then there's the other side, which is like a beautiful, exciting. It's like somewhere in the middle, right? It's like you're
yeah,
like, I don't want the perfect usability site that has everything listed and there's no pictures and you just can find anything super fast versus the one that looks beautiful and
yeah,
amazing and inspiring. And so the thing is that I like that they're trying something new because we keep doing the same thing over and
yeah,
over again because it works, right? And if we can get this one to work really well, and it seemed to work really well based on the demo that I did, then I'd be okay with having a different experience in it. Like, and I just,
yeah.
I'm just ready for some new stuff. That's all. I think there's a part of me that's kind
Sure.
of like, okay, let's do some new
So
stuff.
what I would say is that it is slower and more error prone than just using a more traditional interface, and I don't think that's going to change. I don't think with practice, it's better than other gestural and eye tracking interface I've used before. So it might be the case for you as a listener out there that you're siding on with Bryan and you think it's fine. For me, if you're like me, then you're going to see it as a little bit of a gimmick, and you're going to want to go back to something else. So
But who's
you
to
could
say they
fall
wouldn't
either
allow
way.
you to do both, right? It's like it's a software thing. It
Well,
seems really easy for Apple to say,
yeah.
"Oh, by the way, if you want to use another Apple
Well, we'll get
device
into
to
this, but
control it."
like supporting that, I think it creates a lot of trade offs that I would rather just get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a click of a button turns off eye tracking and
Yeah.
instantly gives you iPhone a use, right?
But what if you could? So, all right, I'll just do it now, right? You have the option of having this or stripping out all the internal sensors or a
Uh huh.
majority of internal sensors and using a more traditional interface. And it's $2,000 instead of $3,500, and the it's lighter, and you don't have to have the you can have more of a universal light shield.
Yeah, but you're assuming that this device doesn't want to use those cameras for other purposes in the future that they've already thought of.
I'm not sure what those would be.
I mean, whatever it is, it has to do with your eyes and it has to do with tracking your eyes. And it could be maybe it's as simple as doing, allowing doctors to do eye tests. But like the reality is that that is in there and embedded very beautifully to the point where you don't even see them, you don't even know where they're at,
Well,
and it just
and
seems like there's options there, right?
the
It's there's
equipment in
options
order
for
to do those
innovation.
eye tests already exists. So I don't know unless you want to just want to be able to do eye tests at home instead of driving 20
Well,
minutes
I
to an
mean,
optometrist appointment.
I would do it. I'd rather do it at home personally, but I
I'd,
but I think but
I'd,
I'm
I'd drive 20 minutes and save myself the thousands of dollars, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but you're under the impression though that this is the end all. It's going to be 3,500 forever. It's going to be right. I think this is just their entry. This is the Tesla Roadster, right? Like
Yeah, but if it's
there's
just the entry, then why do you need it? You can if those are the future use cases, build it in when you have the use cases ready.
well, they might be ready already. I mean, here's the thing. Who's to
Uh,
say that a optometrist doesn't buy these things and then you go to the office and they do everything. They take the 10 machines that they have in their office that are done are used for eye analysis and they say, "Oh, we can do them all with just this," and shrink our
because
office space, right?
the
Like,
whole well, you can't shrink your office space because you have to have a wall of inserts and you have to do a 10-minute setup before a person can come in, and they have to have an Apple ID that they're willing
well,
to
first of all,
ship
you
on.
don't need a wall of inserts. Let's not
There's
be
like 25 of
ridiculous.
them.
I know, but you could put them in a drawer. But
You
like
can store. They're
the
not.
key
I
is
don't think
this:
they're going to stack.
it's okay. It's okay to
Regardless, you have to store them
disagree
all.
on this. I'm
Yeah.
here. It's very listeners will very much understand this. I'm just ready for new innovation. Like I
Sure.
know it would work better if you had something in
Yeah.
your hand and you click through. I know it. I'm just at the point
I
now where
get
I'm
it,
waiting.
but I feel like when we get into the area of like innovation for innovation's sake, but it's not an improvement, you end up with NFTs and stuff.
Well, it's not that it's not an improvement. It's to me, it felt like it was just different. Like so, everything I
Sure.
looked at, I was able to click and tap. Right, like I didn't have
Yeah.
any issues. You know what I mean? Beyond the first
Well,
two minutes of testing
you
it.
I saw you have issues, and I had the same issues of just like, okay, that didn't work because my eyes weren't lined up exactly with the bar quite right, or it didn't
Uh-huh.
recognize because it wasn't because it wasn't tracking my eye incorrectly. Is because I'm not used to being that purposeful with where my eyes are. So if my eyes were slightly off, not perfectly focused because I didn't want to look directly at it in order to like how often you look directly at your spacebar when you hit your spacebar, right?
Yeah.
If like you're trying to hit your spacebar and you're kind of looking generally in that area, it's not going to work. You have to look directly at it, and it became like for me, it was. And here's the thing: like I worked in when I was working in the virtual environments lab at NASA, like we did a lot of the analyses of different types of input approaches, and I've worked a bit more on gestural devices input interfaces than you have. And like it keeps coming down to like we're trying to get it at least as good as previous control methods, and
Uh-huh.
this is it's not as good. It's not. It's might be good enough for an individual based on what they want to use it for, but it is not as good as previous methods. It's not as good as a touch screen. It's not as good as a touchpad, and touchpads and touchscreens are not as good as mouse and keyboard as far as speed and accuracy.
So you're saying that if you were testing this device, meaning like if our company was testing this for them, and even if people succeeded at the tasks, you still might recommend that they do a A/B test with a hardware piece in the hand or a phone or something, and see if we can get the speed up or accuracy up, even if this is kind of like this new generation of kind of like UI that they're trying to implement.
I don't see the purpose in implementing the new generation of a UI other than getting away from other devices that you're already going to have.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. I mean, we don't need to agree on it. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like, that's your own personal experience with this,
Well, if
and I think all of
yeah.
our listeners know at this point that you have a little tiny bit of a beef with Apple because they're so
Well,
specific
no.
about
Well,
everything.
I said the same thing about the Connect, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say this about gestural interfaces all day long, regardless of who makes it. Is that it's a little bit different if I can get rid of my mouse and keyboard. I'll say this about voice, and most of that is coming from like at least the stuff in my personal experience is coming from Amazon.
Yeah.
Is that if I can get rid of my mouse and keyboard, then it's a little bit more of a viable thing, right? If I can get rid of touchscreens and things like that in my environment, then it's a little bit more viable. But I'm still going to have mouses and keyboards. I'm still going to have touch. I'm still going to have a phone in my pocket. So at that point, yes, it's cool, and I would use it. I would check it out. But after about 15 minutes and the novelty wears off, I'm just going to want to go back to something that's a little bit faster and reliable
Mm.
because I'm not
Okay.
buying a device for its input method, right? Like I'm not like I had my previous laptop to this one I had a full touchscreen, and when I bought it, I was like, oh, cool, it has a full touchscreen. I can use a full touchscreen, and I never used it.
Well,
I
I've always
never
said that I
used that
feel like
touchscreen on it.
all of these different input devices tend to work well when they're like all together. Like I'll give you a great example. Like you said
Sure.
touchscreen. I was like, yeah, I don't want to only do touchscreen. Like I tried doing
No.
that as well. And I was like, I don't like this. But what I really liked was when you have a keyboard or something, let's say, and you're working on something, and then for whatever reason, you decide to touch the screen in a certain area and drag something over instead of
Yeah.
using your mouse because you had, for whatever reason, you wanted to, and it's
So
available to you.
I hear what you're saying, and I think this is one of the things with people who have Macs haven't really experienced this because they've never come out with the touchscreen Mac. But I had a laptop that had all the traditional inputs. It had a touch trackpad. It had a keyboard, and you could use it touchscreen. And I used the touchscreen on that for about 3 minutes when I first opened it and thought this will be really cool. I'll use the touchscreen from time to time, and then I never used it after that.
It's probably why Mac never put it in.
Probably, and that's why when I went to go buy another laptop, I was like, nah, I'd rather just not have the touchscreen. It's going to add
Yeah.
weight. It's going to take battery. It's going to do all these things. And it doesn't add anything for me. So
Yeah.
for this, if it meant that it could fix other elements of of the experience, of you don't have to necessarily scan your face, and you don't necessarily have to calibrate every time a new user uses it, and it's because this is a less interactive device and it's more consumptive, you can streamline those interactive elements so you're just getting right to your consumption use cases, then I thought that would be optimal.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point about the whole like scanning your face and stuff like that. That was a whatever it's like 7 minute or 10 minute experience, right? Where we did
Yeah.
all that. But if you actually think about it, because this device has everything built into it, at some point they may set it up so that you put the device on your face and it just counts down from 5 to 1 and it does all the calibration without you doing anything.
If you can strip out the calibration things and having to have a separate like fitted eyepiece and the weight that's assume associated with having
Uh-huh.
all these sensors in, then like great, then there's no trade-offs included. But when for the most, I mean, you're going through like a whole calibration process in order to duplicate the same thing as having a USB mouse. And at that point, I'm like, this seems like a lot of hoops to jump through in order to like do the same thing that you can use a $10 mouse for.
So,
I mean, that's
honestly,
the reality behind it,
I
right?
was like, you know what? This would also help with not having people drive down the street with these things on in their cars, right? Because like you see all these videos of
Yes.
people trying to drive with them, they'd have to use a mouse, so they
Hmm.
couldn't do it. But hey,
So,
let's move on actually from
caveat on
the
that.
UI.
One quick caveat before we move
Uh
off.
huh.
The last thing I'll say about it: if you are somebody who has, for some reason, limited mobility in your hands,
Uh huh.
or in your if you or your shoulders or whatnot, and like using a keyboard or mouse for any amount of time is painful for whatever reason, then this provides a great option. So from an accessibility standpoint, then that is where I think it couldn't really become
True.
useful.
True. Yeah. I mean, it kind of fits those. That's the hard part about anything you put on your face, D,
Yes.
and you change the interface on it. There's a lot of people with a lot of needs and a lot of, you know, disabilities and other things, and it's like you can't accommodate everybody, but it will
Hmm.
accommodate some, right? Let's talk about the experiences we had. So beyond the UI and navigation stuff, we were given the opportunity to try out quite a few different things on the device itself. What are the things that you tried out? Because I they were actually different than mine. Because you told
Really?
me you went
Okay.
into Safari and Notes, and I did not do Safari and Notes at all.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so this might be affecting our experiences,
Uh
our
huh.
perception of the interface a bit then. Because so the first thing we did, we went into photos and they showed what a traditional photo would be,
Hmm.
and you can kind of zoom in and it looked good. It looked really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Uh, then they had like what's the word? The very wide not
Panoramic.
angle, but yeah, the panoramic photos. Those looked really good too. Like those looked fantastic. It was more immersive than I've ever seen before, including other headsets. And I have to point out that the display on this, it looked perfect. There was no screen door effect. There was it sometimes had a little bit of blurring because I think that it wasn't calibrating correctly to my eyes until I tightened it down a lot. Um, but there was no artificing, anything like that. It looked perfect and beautiful. And it's probably the best I've seen before.
Yeah.
Uh, then
Did
it
you
went
see did
into
they show you the photo that looks almost like 3D? Did they?
Yeah, so that reminded me of those Lytro photos because
Yeah, yeah, from the old
worked on
Lytro
Lytro
cameras.
devices from a while back, and I thought it was cool, but at the same time, it just for me it brought up all the issues that we had with the Lytro photos, which is you can't share them anywhere else. You can't show them to anybody. It's kind of like unless you have the headset, like for the Lytro ones, you couldn't really show them unless they had like a light. You couldn't post it to social media because they didn't have the capabilities built in. It's a different file format. And for this, it looked cool. I didn't really care for like the way that the edges were blended in a weird way. They
Mhm.
kind of faded out. That just felt weird to me. Um, but they were cool. It's if you haven't seen like the Lytra ones or these ones, it kind of captures a little bit more of the 3D environment and it captures the kind of the light field as opposed to just a static image.
Yeah.
So you have some limited ability to kind of move around the image, just like usually at just a few degrees, but it is more immersive and pretty cool. I thought if it had a wider, I think those are just taken photos that are taken with the Vision Pro itself, but if it had a wider aspect to them, if they were more like the panoramas and they were more immersive, then it would have been really compelling.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what else did you do? So you did, photos, and then
So,
what'd you do after that?
so we did the photos, and I had a little bit of a challenge, kind of interacting with the photos. Exactly, every now and then, I would try to go to where the controls were, and they didn't pop up. But in general, that worked pretty well for me. So next, we went to Safari. And my immediate reaction was like, I'm not using this to go to Safari. There's no way I'm using this for Safari.
Yeah.
Uh, the so it looked good. I mean, it was Safari. There was nothing different from just using Safari on any other device. Um, the only thing I would say is you could zoom in and get really close on photos, but because it doesn't upscale the resolution of the photos when you do,
Uh-huh.
it's web resolution and it just looks blurry and kind of crappy. So there's just no reason I would use it for that. Um, so after that, we went into some video. We watched some video demos. And I'll say that like for most stuff like Safari or things like that, a lot of like the productivity stuff that they're talking about, like I mean, I do a lot of my work in Excel and like the productivity apps like Google's equivalent to Word and Sheets and stuff like that, or slides. And I would never want to use that with this. I never want my work stuff to be more immersive. That just seems like a very unpleasant experience, right?
Depressing.
Uh, yeah, it's just would you want to be immersed in Excel spreadsheets? I mean, it's bad enough that I have to work on them all the time anyway. And I actually am more of an Excel person. So unless whatever you're working on, you really, really love the feel of being at work and working with those that with those applications that you use for work, like I don't know, Salesforce or whatever,
Uh-huh.
being fully immersed in that is going to be more of an unpleasant experience than a pleasant experience. Um, but we went on to, so I think you also had the video experiences. So we'll kind of talk about together. The one that
Yeah.
I did that you might not have is did some typing in notes. And that's where I was just like, all right, this is not going to work. I tried to type something out and it took several minutes because the just adjusting to like, no, my eye has to look directly at the T and it cannot wander. It has to look at T, then the H, then the E, then the
Yeah.
space bar, then whatever else it is. And if I look up to see, because I usually don't look at my keyboard when I'm typing, I usually look at the output. If you try to use that model, if you peek at the what's coming out of your typing, it'll mess everything up. So I had to delete things multiple times and try again. And you can use your voice, but voice recognition is still not perfect on Apple devices. It's not as good as ChatGPT for sure. So even those I had to delete. And at that point, if you're in a space where there's other people around and you're just talking, dictating, it's
Hmm.
going to get really awkward. So for that, that was one of the reasons why I asked the guy, I was like, I can just connect a keyboard, right? And he said, yes. And that's what I think a lot of people do.
Oh, great. Okay.
So for that, that is where I would go. I wouldn't really use this for text entry. It seems pointless. I don't know why you would. It doesn't add anything to it for sure.
Yeah. So I actually didn't get an opportunity to type anything. What we did is she brought up a book for me to read. And so the point of me bringing it up was the fact that I can expand it obviously to the entire wall. So, it's like you're in a movie theater. And then I can take my hands and kind of scroll up and down and zoom in and kind of read a book on it and stuff like that. That was a really good experience. I wouldn't do it like, oh, I'm going to read a book tonight, so I want this device on my face to read a book. That's not going to happen. But if I did have to read a document or it was presented to me during some sort of experience, whether it be a game or whatever it is, it was very clear and it was very nice.
Okay.
I Interesting thing about the photos. So as we started going through the photos, I kind of had a little bit of an emotional response. There was a couple of them in there that kind of reminded me of like my son's birthday and different things like that, and they were so clear, like they were so real, like in front of you. It was really cool. I actually thought to myself when she started showing me some of the videos as well, which you can talk about your experience with the videos. The one of the grandmother blowing. Wait, there was a grandmother. I'm trying to recall now if this is something else I was thinking about, but they were having a birthday party and there was a grandmother there and that kind of stuff. And the thought that went into my mind is like, if you were able to record these type of experiences with some of the older people in your life, um, and have them tell stories and things like that, to be able to put this device on, it almost makes you feel like you're back sitting at the table with them and listening. And it could be a real beautiful experience for somebody who misses somebody that they loved a lot. And so there was some those types of thoughts kind of started to pop into my head because
Hmm.
the quality was really good, right? It was really nice, it was really clear and just phenomenal. Like I loved it. um I did not do Safari at all. We did a lot of navigation, a lot of playing around with the audio, the video, the reading, and then I told her like I wanted to try to like move things around the room more, expand things, see what happens if I take those pictures and that text and lay it over your face. So you were right in
Mhm.
front of me, and I was like, "What happens if I put it over his face, but I still want to see in the background versus not in the background?" So I was kind of playing around, I think, more with the navigation at that point. But then we moved into something that we both agreed on for sure, which was the immersive experience. So this was not just a regular video that was shot with an iPhone 15, which is the ones that they had given to us during the demo, but this was an 8K immersive experience where you went through a series of different things like watching a woman walk across a slack rope, maybe in Yosemite or something,
Mhm.
someone petting a shark, Alicia Keys singing in front of us,
Yeah.
and it blew my mind. It was clearly the hero case for this product. It was the most beautiful, realistic, immersive, and unbelievably cool experience I've ever had with a headset. Like, now you had this experience. It's interesting. You told me you had this
Mhm.
experience with the Alicia Keys part. That was amazing. Like, it literally felt
Mhm.
like she was in front of me and I can shake her hand. It freaked me out.
Yeah.
But the thing that really sunk with me was the shark, because I've always wanted to kind of like be close to a shark and kind of pet one because I like the ocean and I really like the water and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And when it swims up to me, I felt my hand get going up to wanting to pet it because it felt so real, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and that I hope everyone gets a chance to experience that or try it out because they should.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I think this is like the number one reason to own this device or one like it. I've seen similar stuff with other headsets, and this was just better. I think it comes down to the quality of the displays that are built into it. There's no screen dooring. There's no tearing. There's no negative kind of visual artifacts at all. It's just
Yeah.
just about perfect. The only limitation was getting that perfect fit so you don't have the blurriness.
Yep.
My demo, it started with Alicia Keys up first, and I was
Yep.
just like, oh, and there's no kind of preamble. You don't know what you're going to see, so I was just like, oh crap, that's Alicia Keys, and it felt so real, and I was so close to her because it wasn't a concert, it was like a studio session where they were playing some music. I was like,
Yep.
I thought to myself, I'm invading her personal space. I need to back up a little bit.
Interesting.
Like I had
Interesting.
that instinctive feel to it. I will say we got into the more of the other animal stuff. I think I was number one. I was so kind of distracted by that experience, and I was like, I want more of that. I want more. I want concerts. I want studio sessions. I want to be a fly on the wall while a musician is recording an album, or just playing something, right? Like John Legend playing a piano or whatever. Um, that the other ones didn't have as much of an impact for me. I will say that when I got into the shark, for example, right? That didn't stand out for me, and I think one as much as it did for you. It was super cool, and people should definitely try it out. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I have actually seen sharks up close like that in the wild,
Mhm.
like wild sharks at tunnels in Kauai, and it didn't feel the same way. And I think one of the things the way I didn't is that you're still just kind of limited to two senses. You're not feeling the water on you. You're not feeling the temperature. Like I didn't feel the sense of danger then, even though it was
Mhm.
just like a. I think in the video, I don't remember what kind of. It might have been like a dog shark or something, but like it was bigger than the white tip reef shark and the black tip reef shark that I've been that close to in real life,
Mhm.
and it. But it also for me didn't feel the sense of danger I did in that environment, even though it was a more dangerous shark. So that at that point it was I think I was just so distracted by that initial experience. They did show some sports stuff, some like watching a goal happening in a soccer game from like
Mhm.
right behind the goal, and I was like, oh yeah, that is something that I would do. A lot of other people would do. Maybe not
Oh yeah.
soccer per se, but whatever your sport of interest is. There were a lot of cool things. I will point out that the reason I think that they're not calling this VR is because there weren't really what I would call VR use cases to this. There
Mhm.
were not really virtual environments that it was putting you into. Because I was talking with Christine about kind of this experience, and it's like, oh yeah, you could do this and this. I'm like, no, because the way these videos are produced is they put a camera down and you're kind of stationary, or maybe you're on rails like a ride at Universal Studios,
Uh-huh.
but you're not free form moving around like if you were in a 3D rendered environment like a video game. I don't know if this piece of hardware has the capability of doing like dropping you into Elden Ring and you can explore like an open world kind of stuff,
Uh-huh.
um, which would be really cool. But it's another reason why you might not want this interface. And I know you can connect controllers. I've seen people using a PlayStation 5 controller with this, but that I think is kind of the next level. And if you can be in like a FromSoft game fighting giant like nightmare monsters and it just feels immersive like that, that feels like it's the next level beyond what we saw. But even if you don't get there, the stuff that I saw was like, I want that.
Yeah.
Um,
I felt that
and
way.
a
I
lot
mean,
of
what about Minecraft? So many people love to be immersed in Minecraft, and I read the Minecraft books that my son has, and it's like it's all about they put on these VR headsets, and suddenly they're
mhm,
sucked into the world, and they're actually digging in the ground, and actually like, can you imagine a fully immersive that Alicia Keys
that
experience, but it's actually Minecraft? Like,
that should be possible. I think
I
it
know.
should be. But the thing is, it's not photorealistic, so I think it's going to lose a fair
Oh,
amount
true,
of,
true.
and it's voxel based. So it's Minecraft is actually um, more technically demanding than you might expect it to be because every element in the environment is interactive. It's not like some things are static and some things are interactive. So it
Yeah.
is like I wonder how I should work fine because it's got an M2. It's not like it's running like a super top end like NVIDIA graphics card, but it should be good enough. I don't know. My question when I saw this was like, why isn't this way out front? Why isn't this what I did first in this application? Why aren't they marketing this as like, here's what you want this for, and instead you want these other what I would call mixed reality use cases around
Mhm.
productivity? I think it's ultimately because they don't necessarily have control over the content and they're more dependent on
Oh,
others either
100%.
having the rights to that content and things. But regardless, I would say no, strip out all this other stuff. I don't really care about using this for productivity. I don't really even care that much about the interface. If you make this just give me an accelerometer with these displays and access to this content like the concerts and virtual tourism and sports events, that's what this is all about to me.
I felt exactly the same way. I
Mhm.
had no problems, like I said before, with the interface and kind of the way it's built. I think the teams I think they did a pretty good job with it, considering the fact that this was probably a pretty challenging thing to kind of overcome. And there's a lot of criticism out there of previous versions of other companies making these devices. But I felt the same way. I was like, this is the hero experience, but it was shot in 8K and it was done in a very specific way. I mean, you could see the pores on her face when she was singing Alicia Keys.
Mhm.
Like, it also made me think like, okay, so I pay $3,000 for a ticket to get up close to see Taylor Swift at her concert, or I pay $99, I pop this thing on and I'm right there with her on stage, right? This is a category that people would spend money on. I would spend money on it. I would
Yeah,
spend money on the sports experience. I love the idea of courtside tickets to the Warriors. I'm literally turning around, looking, watching the players. Now, granted, that experience requires you to be streaming it live because most people want to see a game happen like in the moment, right? So there's whole other
yeah, I think
challenges there.
there is a challenge, I think, when it comes to live sports. For concerts, I think that, it's like the Eras tour with Taylor Swift. You can watch
Yeah,
an archive concert and that's fine. If they had something like this where somebody recorded in 8K with these immersive 3D cameras and it was like a Prince concert before he died, I would
yeah.
absolutely be that would if I had one of these devices and that was available, that would be the first thing I did.
Oh yeah, and also too, like if you look at their partnership with Disney, I mean, he went
Mhm,
out on stage with Bob Iger about this, right? You don't think
mhm,
Disney's going to be producing things specifically for this device? They are. Like I think things are coming down the pipeline that will
mhm.
drive that particular
Yeah,
experience, but it's not up front. And I only say that because all I hear about is like, oh, it's productivity. You can create big screens. You can have 15 screens around you and stuff.
I'm like,
It didn't
no.
feel 100% right for that. It felt like it was like it'll be okay, but like I don't necessarily want to work
I
that way
I
personally.
I will be
So
upfront, I would never do that, and
yeah,
it would never be worth my money because, like, honestly, after I definitely sensed some eye strain. I had some headaches afterwards, like later that night and stuff. So I would definitely not use this for work. I would, and it's so much cheaper. You can get a really, really high end display or multiple displays for way less than this, and just have it and be able to like show somebody what's going on and not have
Yeah.
to have something strapped to your face and things like that, and be able to just use like more traditional interfaces that I think are more effective, to be honest.
Well, I think that these devices in general, and I'm gonna go general, not just Apple and Meta, but anyone who's creating them, right? Is right now, and I've said this, and I think they all know this, right? Is that they're kind of like in search of a use case. Like they don't
Hmm.
really have the greatest use case. They know that people can have amazing experiences with them. They just have a lot of edge cases. Even
Hmm.
concerts is an edge case. I mean, you're going to build a device that costs $1 billion to build so that you can watch concerts. Well, maybe, but that's unlikely that a business does
Well,
that. Usually, a
yeah.
business looks for large, multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar potential
Well,
opportunities,
yeah,
right?
this is the elephant in the room is that the use case that is going to make more money than concerts and more money than live events and more money than virtual tourism and those immersive experiences is gaming.
Mhm.
And
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
it's it's already the biggest industry out there. It's bigger, or it's entertainment industry that's out there. It's bigger than music. It's bigger than movies. It's, I believe, bigger than tourism. It is it, and it's not significantly supported on this, and it probably should be. And I think if they don't want it to be that, and they want it to be to be other experiences, gaming is still the bridge that gets you there, and it is the
Yep,
thing that makes this, because it would be the best gaming device hands down uh,
to
if
do
it
that.
supported them. It would blow any VR based experience away completely.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about two final things, and then we'll wrap up because we don't want to run too long here. But like, first off, I love the question that you had that you wanted us to address, which if individually we both had to develop a V2 of this device and release it, let's say next year or the year after, what are the three or four things that we would address immediately for V2? So you go first.
All right, so the first thing I would do is I would really try to make this more universal and more get you directly into the use of it and not have to do the calibration. I don't think that the interface method of the gestural interface really adds anything to it. Um, I would kind of strip out a lot of those things about the eye tracking and the gestural interface and those sensors, and I would just add on a like what other headsets use of just having like a little joystick and thing to use that, and you could also pair it to your phone and use that, or pair it to another device and use that. And I would also switch out the glass that's in front because it seemed like that added weight in an odd way. If you switch it to plastic or aluminum, I think it's lighter. I don't think you need any outward facing display because we didn't see the eye pass through thing, but everything I've seen about it was it looks really odd and awkward, and I think there's a reason why they didn't show it to us.
Yeah, they didn't have either one of us do it.
Yeah, I would just, because I don't think that this is a super interactive device. I don't think that inputs are need to be super. I don't think that you're going to be sitting there like clicking, 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 clicking all the time, right? You're going to go in, you're going to look at photos, you're going to watch videos, you go into immersive experiences, and maybe if they support it more, then it would have gaming. But that's what I would do. I would bundle in some level of some of these virtual experiences. For me, it would probably be you can go to this is kind of the challenge, right? Because you still would need to pay for some of these experiences, especially if Apple doesn't own them. But Apple does is producing a concert series. So there's a Apple Music SZA. I think there's some other. I think there might be The Weekend or Drake or things like that. If those can be bundled in with your purchase of the device, you get access to the Apple Music concert series, and maybe they can do some things that are like more some more indie experience concerts, and maybe they can produce some 3D travel. Like here's what it's like going to like going through Yosemite, or you're up at Glacier Point, or you're at Half Dome or something like that, and do some
Yeah.
things like that that are bundled in. And then you can pay more for the more higher end concerts, or the Super Bowl, or the NBA Finals, or things like that. There, you still have other people to pay there, but I think you have to have some stuff bundled in. I would get gaming to have a much stronger footprint on this device, and I would market
Mhm.
it out front. I would have like that controller as kind of a default. I would have an Apple branded controller that that you could buy alongside it. Maybe that's just knock off what Sony or Nintendo or anybody else is doing when it comes to controllers. You don't think you need to
Mhm.
reinvent the wheel with that. But I would put more of the processing power in the battery pack rather than strictly in the device. I think that kind of opens up what you do with weight, um, and what you can maybe some performance when it comes to rendering 3D environments, because you can't go without the 3D anyway, or without the battery pack anyway. I would feel differently if you could untether the battery pack and just use it independently, but you can't.
Mhm.
So since it has to be there, I would put some processing power within that, even if it's another GPU or something. That's it.
Yeah.
That way, it you can have a little bit more of, if that's a limitation when it comes to 3D rendering environments and having immersive 3D environments that you can walk around in, then I would make that a little bit more so. And I would honestly, I would de-emphasize a lot of this productivity stuff, because I don't see the point of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are good. I think that's, a solid UX review of what you would do for the next level of it. Some of those things are similar for my feedback. I think for me, the main thing is I'd want to get the weight down. I'd
Mm-hmm.
want to have a universal fit. I think getting away from having to switch individual. What is that piece called, by the way?
I think it was called an eye shield, or
Eye
like a
shield,
light
yeah.
blocker. Yeah,
So the eye shield or light blocker little piece that's in the middle, like I just need to get rid of that completely. Like this whole idea of like having to like get custom ones and stuff like that. We have to find a way to do that. I'm sure there is. It's probably expensive. As a friend mentioned to me, it's kind of not necessarily the Apple way. Meaning Apple's usually loves everything to be very fitted and custom and perfect for you. But maybe there's a way to get there, right? And so I
yeah,
would I would get rid of that. I agree with the productivity stuff. I don't want to work on this like that. It's just not my cup of tea. Like I tried it. I don't want to sit on this thing for a long period of time. If it was super light on my face, maybe, but like I not even close right now. I would highly emphasize um, the immersive experience stuff and the sports stuff, and just really basically it's this idea. I think that V2 should be all about taking you from where you are to a completely different experience. That's the summary. I live at home. I live in Silicon Valley. I work in my house all the time, and I put this device on, and I'm instantly courtside at the Warriors. I'm instantly on the Eras tour. I'm instantly underwater with the sharks and having a fun experience. I think that the key should be I'm taking you away from where you are, taking you somewhere
hmm
else, giving you something awesome, and bringing you back. That should be V2.
yeah.
And
I
in
think
order
that
to do
it's
that, you have to reduce the weight. You have to
yeah,
reduce the friction points that are there. Even if they're minor ones, you got to take them out because this is an immersive experience. And that's
yeah,
it. I mean,
yeah.
that's pretty much it for me.
I think that is the biggest thing, is that it needs to be like Visa says, right? It's everywhere you want to be. And most
Exactly.
people don't want to be immersed in the office. Like it's like forced head down work.
Yep.
Um, but I think if they did that, if they emphasized these kinds of more compelling experiences, and remove some of these friction points, and brought gaming out a little bit more, because that's what the market has shown that they want to use these devices for more than anything else, then I think it's awesome. What is your prediction for what happens with
Yeah. So
this
my
device?
prediction is this is the Tesla Roadster, and I think a lot of people are going to buy it. They're going to have fun with it in different ways. I think Apple is listening, and I think they are going to come out with a V2 or V3. Maybe it takes a couple of years, and they're going to reduce those friction points. they're going to focus on partnerships with big companies like Disney and others, and maybe even partly with Epic because Disney is now partnering with, well, I guess they have a fight with them, but whatever. But they're going
Hmm.
to partner with these big companies and they're going to start weaving in custom content and driving you to this experience as if this was like Netflix. Like it's new and Netflix is like, what are we going to do? We got to create our own content. We got to partner with everyone under the world. Like I think they're going to bring everybody in house to a point where everyone goes, this is a subset of my experiences in life. I can go to the movies, I can put my headset on, I can go to a live concert. It's just fitted in. And I think that that's going to happen. And it's going to happen sooner than we think. I think it's only going to take a couple of revisions, maybe 2 or 3 years. And we're going to look at it and go, I kind of want one of those. Like, I think it'd be kind of fun. Um, but I don't think that they are going to remove the glass. I don't think they're going to dampen down gestural stuff. I think they're going to double down on it, honestly. And they're going to say, we want this to be, like you said, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. They always do hardware really well. I think they're going to keep all those things in and they're going to try to do their best to shrink it. Look at every Apple um, event that happens, right? Every September or whatever it is. They're like, this time we are 32 grams lighter, we are
Yeah.
3% shinier, right? They always find a way to get there. So that's my
Hmm.
prediction.
I I think mine is similar to yours. I think it is less the Tesla Roadster and more the Apple Newton, where it
Harsh.
is. It's just. I think that it demonstrates a core concept that is extremely compelling and is the future, but their approach to it is not quite right. And I don't know if it feels like it's a precursor to what is finally going to crack this kind of VR MR experience. And
Yeah.
the question for me is whether or not it is Apple or whether it is somebody who creates kind of a knockoff who trims out the unnecessary, um, the ancillary stuff. Like I
Yeah.
feel like the gestural interface and the eye tracking is ancillary and focuses in on those core experiences and give the users what they want. So it's a question of whether or not Apple is willing to do that with the V2, or if it's going to be somebody like Samsung or Valve or Lenovo who is
Yeah.
going to copy their displays. And I'll point out that the audio was pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. What's
it
bad?
was had little speakers that played kind of. It didn't go in ear or over ear. It was pretty good. It wasn't it didn't blow me away, but I'm like into headsets and headphones and things like that. So I would I would have preferred to been able to like, all right, let me put some like high end headphones over the top of this or IEMs that can connect with it and get
Hmm.
better quality, but it was good enough. And the spatial audio is quite good, like the way it's spatialized. That comes down to DSP and processing as far as your head movement and things. But it would not surprise me. Actually, it is my prediction. I'm going to predict it that someone like Samsung or somebody else is just going to copy the core elements as far as the head tracking and the display quality and built around some of these immersive use cases. And maybe it'll even be Epic in collaboration with Disney in order to put this out. That's going to be like a gaming machine with 3D immersive content they have access to from Disney and ESPN in order to really provide to tackle the use cases, the core use cases that are associated with it. But that's cut, and it'll be stripped down, and it'll be cheaper, and it won't be as pretty, and it won't feel as good. But it's going to highlight those most compelling use cases, and it'll probably sell more. Um, and then maybe Apple will come along after that and give the users really what they want.
Yeah. Well, y'all heard it. This was an honest feedback. I mean, we literally just tested this device and dug in deep and we didn't pull any punches. I mean, I think we gave a fair assessment. We disagreed on a lot of things and we agreed on some of them. So thanks everyone for listening to this and thanks for being supporters of the podcast. As I always say, we're going to drop versions of this podcast on YouTube so you can listen to it over there or whatever podcast player you use. Also, if you could just tell a friend or give us a review or shoot us an email, we always love having some sort of engagement with us. So thank you all for listening and we will see you all next week.